And we're going to talk about protecting our food, the sanctity of our food, and a couple other legal issues. So a little bit about me. I'm an attorney, and I'm a natural health care professional as well. And so helping people obtain health through natural means is a passion of mine. And so first thing, introduction, I think it's something that everybody knows, but there's a definite link between your health and your food. And I think that our society is a little bit schizophrenic because everyone says that they know that, but when you look at how they eat, it doesn't show, you know, they don't practice it. So most packaged foods that we have out there are low nutritional value, they're high in salt, and they're high in sodium content and also in calories. So another thing, about 80% at least of all of our packaged food has GMO ingredients in them. But you won't see it on the label. It's not labeled in any way whatsoever. And so some of the main problems that we have with packaged foods is that it leads to weight gain and obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular conditions, and then advanced aging. So it causes inflammation. Inflammation then causes the advanced aging. And so you might not see it externally, but it's going on inside, or vice versa. But you can be sure that it is going on inside if your diet is going to be made up of packaged foods. Now, has anyone seen the movie Super Size Me? It's an old movie. It was a really good movie though, because Morgan Spurlock was in really good health, and he decided that what he was going to do is he was going to eat only McDonald's every day for 30 days. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And he had a couple of rules. One rule was he had to have at least every item on the menu at least once. And if they asked, do you want it supersized, he had to say yes. So he ended up gaining a lot of weight. And some of his symptoms were the headaches, mood swings, depression and exhaustion, fatty liver. He had massive cravings. He had weight gain. There's actually one scene in the movie where it caused him to vomit, having to eat it. But then he was right back there at it. Like, I mean, he had the craving for it. So what is in the fast food, and in this case McDonald's, is really, really bad for your health. It's bad for your health because of the high calories, the low nutrition, the sodium, the fat, but also genetically modified ingredients are in everything. It's in the bread, it's in the oils that they use, it's in everything. So we want labeling here in California. Most of the people want it. However, we lost in the election for food labeling. But if our food was properly labeled, it would be labeled like it says in this cartoon here. And we want when you talk to somebody, they tell you, yes, I want to know what's in my food. I want the labeling. But what happens is we've got the big lobbyists that come in, the Grocery Manufacturers Association, food companies, Coca-Cola, Nestle, all of these food companies come in. They pour massive, massive amounts of money into lobbying for having no labeling. And so, like I said, nobody disputes that there's a link between your health and your diet. There's, hands down, there's a link. You can look and you can see people have reversed diabetes by changing their diet. So it's dietary. There's all sorts of conditions. There's cancer. There's all sorts of conditions that people have been able to reverse through diet, cleaning up their diet, getting serious about it. But when it comes to genetically modified foods, we are told that they're safe. And it makes absolutely no sense. I love this little cartoon because, you know, it says here's a bunch of food that's made from crops that cause insect stomachs to explode, but it's safe for you. And this is ridiculous. I mean, if it's put in these terms and people see what's actually going on, it's just common sense that these aren't safe. Now, the problem that we have here in the US is that we have said if it's not proven to be dangerous, then we assume it's safe. And in other countries, it's the opposite. If you haven't proven it to be safe, then we're going to deem, you know, that we shouldn't have it in the food supply, that it's dangerous. So there is something that's called the DARK Act. And has anybody heard of the DARK Act? One person. Okay, it's Deny Americans the Right to Know. And that's what we call it. What they call it is something a little bit different. And what's really important is to realize that there's so many laws out there that impact you every single day. There's laws with regard to, you know, the food you eat, the labels, you know, why do we have certain labels that say what they say? It's because there's laws out there that governs what you drink, what ingredients are in there. There's laws that govern supplements and medication and medical care and housing. So the law impacts like every aspect of your life, whether you realize it or not. And so that's why it's really important for us to keep informed and up to date onto what's going on with the legal system. Now, we call it the Deny Americans the Right to Know Act, which we'll get into, but what the government calls it, it's the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act of 2015. And so when you look at that title, like who does not want safe, you know, food labeling? I mean, that sounds wonderful. Who doesn't want accurate food labeling? I want accurate food labeling. I want safe food labeling. But we'll get into it and we'll see that's not really what's going on here. So the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act of 2015 says a few things. One, that food producers must notify the FDA of any GMO food sold interstate and disallows the sale of any GM food that is not deemed safe by the FDA. Well, that sounds great, right? The problem with that is it's the food manufacturers that are making up whether or not it's safe. And then they go and they tell the FDA, oh, you know what, it's safe. Then the FDA says, okay, the food is safe. And it's circular reasoning. It makes no sense whatsoever. And to somebody who doesn't really investigate and see what's going on, it seems that the FDA is doing some kind of research. And they're not. And to me, I mean, this is just pure deception. Another thing with the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act, it prevents the FDA from requiring the labeling of GMO foods only on the grounds that the foods are GMO. So just the mere fact that it's GMO does not allow there to be any requirement that it be labeled. So you're not going to be seeing these different food labels if this act passes. Now, another thing that I thought was really disturbing is that dairy products from animals fed with GMO foods, those products, and also if products are used using enzymes or different GMO aids, they can be labeled as non-GMO. So again, it's deceptive. Here we are thinking that if it's labeled non-GMO, that it's safe and there's nothing genetically modified going on with that food. And when you're feeding an animal something that's genetically modified, the animals get sick. And so you're not having a high quality food. And there's lots of studies out there that you can look at and you can see what happens to an animal when they're fed a diet of GMO foods. The bill's also going to prevent states from issuing their own food labeling requirements. And I think that's one of the most insidious things about this bill. Now, what I find fascinating is kind of the history about how this bill came about. There's this Mike Pompeo. Now, he is a representative from Kansas. Kansas is the food basket of the United States, food basket of the world. And so he says that legislation takes an approach that's far better than a 50-state patchwork of GMO labeling laws, and that GMOs are safe and have a number of important benefits for people and our planet. So he's just making the stuff up. He's not a scientist. He's being told this, and we'll find out who's telling him this information. But he's just saying that it's safe. And there's no evidence to back up whether or not it is safe, just his assertion that it's safe. Now, a couple of the provisions of the Act, the use of the GMO itself does not constitute a material difference. So just because you have a genetically modified corn, for example, doesn't make that materially different than organic corn or non-GMO corn. And so they're wiping away any distinction between genetically modified and conventional. A food's label or advertising cannot suggest that non-GMO foods are safer or higher quality than the GMO foods. So you can't make that food claim. You can't say ours is better because it's not GMO. You can't make those claims. If you do, you're going to come under fire with the FDA and the FTC because it's false advertising. These are going to be the advertising laws out there. And then here's the last one. The FDA must define the word natural. Right now, when you see the word natural, it means absolutely nothing. Most people look at that and they see a pretty picture on the package and they see the word natural and they think, oh, this is good for me. This is pure. This is, this is not GMO, but natural means absolutely nothing. And so after 2 years, if this passes, after 2 years, the FDA has to define what the word natural means, and it can include GMO. So again, natural, that word is going to be further tainted. We talk about safe and accurate food labeling. The average person looking at, at a package on the shelf is going to assume that this is a product that's good for them and their family. So that's why we've deemed it the DARK Act, Deny Americans the Right to Know Act. So what happens is it preempts any state from having a labeling law. And it makes it virtually impossible for FDA to mandate a national GMO labeling system, because this is already saying that GMOs are safe. It's making all sorts of assumptions. And right now it's a voluntary system where the company that makes the GMO seed or product voluntarily will report to the FDA, oh, there's a problem with this. And because it's voluntary and the company isn't going to want to be having their sales decline, they don't report to the FDA or anybody that there's problems with the product. And so it's creating a GMO safety review system, and it's based on industry science. And this is what we see with also pharmaceuticals, is that it's the pharmaceutical company that does the study that says, oh, this medication works great, and these are the side effects, and they put it out there on the market. So it's the same thing now that we're going to have with the labeling if this passes. Okay, so how did this happen? What happened is Vermont was the first state to have a GMO labeling law passed. And The Grocery Manufacturers Association were all up in arms over this, and they decided to sue the state of Vermont. And then Connecticut and Maine were next to follow. California lost narrowly, Oregon lost narrowly. So all these states are putting these bills on the ballot, and the Grocery Manufacturers Association and the lobbyists are pouring millions and billions of dollars to prevent the labeling, which, why? You know, what do you have to hide? And so what happened is they decided, okay, let's forget about all of this. Let them, you know, the people organize their grassroots. Let them try and put ballots on each state. We're going to undercut everything. They went to Mike Pompeo and I think his name was Butterfield, and they said, let's introduce legislation, which is this one, the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act, which will eliminate the ability for states to pass any laws with regard to the food labels. Undercuts all of that. I mean, it's a brilliant move. It's horrible for us. It's detrimental to you know, the consumers, but on their behalf, it was a brilliant move. And that's why they're trying to push this through as quickly as they can. So again, Mike Pompeo, he's this big proponent for it. He says that modified foods are needed and they're safe. He doesn't explain anything else why they're needed. He doesn't explain anything more about how they're safe, you know, what studies there are. He just makes these statements. And Kansas feeds the world, so therefore we have to have them. Now, he also quotes a recent study that showed that your food label, I mean your food bill will go up by $400 a year if the GMO labeling laws come into effect. Well, what's interesting about this study is they didn't study what they purported to study. What they studied was, what is a large enough figure that will be believable, that people will also be a little scared that they don't want their food bill to go up. And that's what happened in California. And so that's how they came up with that $400 figure. They never did a study to say whether or not it was going to actually impact the food bill. And then the reality is that it wouldn't impact the food bill. And if it would be like cents or pennies. So completely false, but now he's relying on this study. He also says, which is true, for the last 20 years, we've enjoyed, I haven't enjoyed it, but GM foods, and nearly 80% of our grocery shelves are filled with GM foods. That's huge. That means the breakfast cereals that, you know, your kids and grandchildren want off that shelf, they've got genetically modified ingredients in there. Your salad dressings, because it's got soy and canola oil. You know, anything that you see that's got any of the cottonseed oil, the canola oil, anything with soy, unless it specifically says it's organic, you can be pretty confident that it's going to be genetically modified. And so this act would require that the FDA has the sole authority to label GMOs. And so they say if an ingredient is unsafe, it would require a label. How does that make any sense? If an ingredient is unsafe, it will require a label. Why don't we just get rid of the ingredient if it's unsafe? But another problem with that is, who's telling us whether it's safe or unsafe? It's Monsanto, it's Nestle, it's all the companies. And they're the ones that are making money by having the product out there on the market. So we can't really trust them. So the question then becomes, how did Mike Pompeo become elected? And it's the industry groups that supported him. You know, they knew that they could get his support in this bill if they gave campaign contributions. So agribusiness supported him heavily. The food and beverage industry supported him. Koch Industries supported him. And so all of these big companies that have a stake in this bill are the people that are supporting him. So the Grocery Manufacturers Association, just want to talk a little bit about who they are, because most people haven't really heard of the Grocery Manufacturers Association, don't understand what their purpose is. If you go on their website, you're going to see what their purpose is. Their purpose is to constantly work with the FDA and Congress to strengthen food safety standards and testing. That's what it says on the website. Sounds really good. But I mean, all of this stuff is marketing. You can say almost anything and make it sound good. Another thing it says is that GMA and its members are committed to ensuring that consumers have safe, healthy food and grocery options. Another thing that sounds wonderful, right? Then why are they so against labeling a food as genetically modified? What they did, there's a couple of things that they did I thought was priceless. They started the Healthy Schools Partnership, innovative school-based program designed to integrate nutrition curriculum with PE. Well, you can be assured that whatever foods that they're bringing into the schools, it's going to be from one of their companies. So they're not going to be getting the healthy food. And if you look at what these schools have, they're getting food from fast food companies that are brought in for lunches. It's all genetically modified, highly processed foods, very unnutritious. But my favorite one is they have this program. It's the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation, designed to help reduce obesity by 2015. So how do you think they've done? I look around and I see statistics. They have not made a dent. But the website looks pretty and it sounds good and people buy into what the website says. But so then who's watching out for us? Is it the FDA? FDA's website too has a great mission statement, but they're not following through on the mission statement. They're abdicating everything over to the GMA. Is it Congress? No, we've got the DARK Act that passed the House of Representatives. Most people didn't even realize what was going on. So is it the GMA? Well, absolutely not. Is it Monsanto? They're a member of the GMA? Absolutely not. Everyone is like in bed together. And we, the consumers, are like on the outside. So they're not watching out for us. Going back to the GMA and looking again at their mission statement, one of the things that they had done is they petitioned the FDA to approve low-level use of partially hydrogenated oils. Now, way back in, I think it was like in the 30s, that's when we started seeing the partially hydrogenated vegetable oils put on the market. And they were touted as this great thing. They were heart healthy. You didn't want saturated fats because you might have a heart attack. Let's go and have, these margarines and things like that. Well, what ended up happening is we, the public, were the guinea pig, and it was determined that these oils cause heart disease. And so there was like hundreds of thousands of deaths over the years due to these oils being introduced into our diets, even though we were told that they were healthy. Well, then it gets to the point where we can't deny the evidence anymore. The evidence shows that partially hydrogenated oils are causing heart disease, causing people to have heart attacks. So the partially hydrogenated oils, when you put those into a pastry, for example, or a cookie, it gives it a really nice texture, and that's why they don't want to get rid of using that ingredient in packaged foods. And so you'll see packaged foods that will say 0 trans fats on there, and it gives the illusion that there's 0 trans fats in there. Couple things on that. It's 0 trans fats. You can have, I think it's 0.0 or 0.5 grams. I don't remember the exact amount, but of the trans fat in the product per serving. So most people eat more than 1 serving size. So they're getting amounts of the trans fats that they're clueless. They don't realize that they're consuming it. But the GMA, because they are a lobbyist and they're there to protect the interest of their members, which is Monsanto and Nestle, Coca-Cola, all of these big companies, what they did is they petitioned the FDA and they said, you know what, let's change the designation. So instead of it being an ingredient, we're going to make it a food additive. That changes everything. If it's a food additive, it didn't have to be listed on the ingredient list, and they could still continue to use the partially hydrogenated oils. So when I look at things like this that happen kind of behind the scenes, that it's not widely publicized, it's deceptive. And how can I trust, the GMA or, even the members of the GMA to do something that's in my benefit when they're doing this, when they know that partially hydrogenated oils cause heart disease and contribute to that? So they are not an organization that can be trusted. What they say on their website as far as their mission statement, constantly working with the FDA and Congress to strengthen the food safety, it's all empty words. It sounds great, it looks pretty on the website, it makes you feel good when you read it, but it's meaningless and it does nothing. So the FDA, what they did with regard to the partially hydrogenated oils is they announced on June 16th that it was changing the regulatory status of the hydrogenated oils from generally recognized as safe, because they know it's not, to food additive. So they can continue using these food additives without having it on the label. So we know that, we can look at the history of the GMA and we can see what they've been doing. We can see who they are interested in, and it's supporting Monsanto, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestle, Kraft, all of the big companies. And there's about 300 industries that are represented by the GMA. And so instead of having, each individual company contribute to the, lobbying efforts, they give their money to the GMA. The GMA is this big, mighty force, and they have so much more power when the 300 companies are coming together. And that, to me, is a lesson that we can learn, is that they have come together with 300 companies with all sorts of money, developing grassroots and getting people informed, letting people know what's going on out there. We have a big, huge voice. And so we can vote with our dollars. So the status now of the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act, it's also called HR 1599. The House of Representatives passed this. It was a vote of 275 to 150. So there's a couple things that we can do. One is you can look and see whether your representative voted for it, and you can vote them out of office. That's one thing. But the Senate has not voted yet. And so time is of the essence. It's really important to voice your opinion, because the evidence shows that the people want the labeling. You know, 30 out of 50 states have already introduced legislation, and to have this pass is going to undercut all of that. Any food labeling law is going to be null and void. Any state food labeling law is going to be null and void if this passes. So we need to band together, and we need to let our voice be heard. Now, I've talked last month about the vaccines, and I want to give you guys a little bit of an update, and so you know what is coming in the future. So SB 277 here in California was signed into law by Governor Brown, and he is not happy in and not him, I should say, but the vaccine industry, pharmaceutical companies. They aren't happy with stopping at denying parents the right to choose whether or not they want their child to have a medical procedure. What's on the agenda is forced vaccination for adults, which is really scary. There's the National Adult Immunization Plan National Vaccine Program Office. And there is a draft that was drafted on February 5th, 2015. And if you're interested, you can look at this online at www.hhs.gov, so healthandhumanservices.gov. And you can see what they have in plan. And so certain assumptions. Assumption number 1, vaccination is considered one of the most important public health achievements in the 20th century. Assumption number 2, vaccines save lives and improve the quality of life by preventing serious infectious diseases and their consequences. Assumption number 3, and this is where it gets scary, even scarier than the first 2 assumptions. Adult vaccination rates remain low in the U.S. That is not good for the pharmaceutical companies. They have a gold mine here of people that they can get their profits up by forcing vaccination on adults. The National Vaccine Advisory Committee and numerous stakeholder groups have emphasized the need for focused attention on adult vaccines and vaccinations. So this is the next step. This is where we're going. And we're already kind of getting accustomed to, oh, you know, we have vaccines for our children. So the next obvious step, okay, let's do the vaccines for adults. If you look at this document, you're going to see what their vision is: to protect the public health, to achieve optimal prevention of infectious diseases and their consequences through vaccination of all adults, all of them, across the board. That is pretty scary, but they're going to do whatever they can to accomplish this. So that was their vision, and here's their 4 goals: to strengthen the adult immunization infrastructure. So they want to get what's communication. They want the government to be able to know what's going on. And if you look at things that are set in place with Obamacare, you can see that this is not far off. They'll be able to know whether or not you are vaccinated. They want to improve access to adult vaccinations. They want to increase community demand for adult immunizations. So it's kind of like peer pressure. You know, I got vaccinated. Did you get vaccinated? They want to introduce these kinds of things in more social settings. And it is kind of peer pressure, which I think on their part, like they know what they're doing. These people are like marketing geniuses. They know what they're doing. And it's our job to expose what they're doing and let people know. And the last goal is to foster innovation in adult vaccine development and vaccination-related technology. So these are the 4 goals that are set forth in this document. And so it's important, like what can we do? I never like to give the bad news without giving some good news, and telling you, there's things that you can do. Number one, keep yourself informed, get yourself educated, educate your family, educate your friends, your acquaintances. Just let people know what's going on. And as far as the vaccine argument, I don't get into the argument of vaccines are good, vaccines are bad, any of that. I see this as a rights issue. It's like my rights are being trampled on. A vaccination is a medical procedure, and medical procedures should be done on a very individual basis. And to say everybody has to be on a vaccination schedule it takes that individuality out of it. And to say that I have to have one, you're trampling on my rights. Like, this is my body. I should be able to determine whether or not I have a medical procedure done on my body. So looking at it from that perspective, I think most people would have to agree with that argument. Nobody wants to be told what to do. Adults, in our country, we're raised on the First Amendment, where we can say the things that we want to say and worship where we want to worship. We have these freedoms, but to be told you have to have a vaccination, that tramples on your rights. The next thing is the SB 277 in California. Support anything that you can, anything that you find that either is going to get a referendum on the ballot to overturn the SB 277. And any other challenges. I know that there's a lot of challenges to the senators and the people that have pushed to make this law. So Senator Pan, for example. The next thing on the DARK Act, right now is the time. Right now it's really important to act, to let your voice be heard, let your senator know that you do not favor this, that you want to have, you want your senator to vote no against this, because the vote's coming up really, really shortly. And then connect with like-minded people. And then keep yourself informed about anything regarding adult vaccination. That's a really, really important topic, and it's something that things keep getting enacted, different laws keep getting enacted without us knowing it. There was, at the time the SB 277 was being pushed, there was another law that was being pushed in as well for adults that work with children, making it a crime for an adult that works with a child to not be vaccinated. That didn't get attention, but that's what happens with these types of programs, and that's what's happening here with the adult vaccination. So feel free to give me a call. Another thing that we can talk about is getting yourself healthy with nutrition and diet and different protocols to help if you have been vaccine injured or you're forced to get vaccines. So thank you very much for your attention, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.